Welcome to the Simply Authentic podcast with Angie and Tonya, where we will enlighten you with our real estate knowledge, highlight entrepreneurship, and have conversations about your passions, goals, and your struggles.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to Simply Authentic Podcast.
I'm Tonya Murphin.
And I'm Angie Mullings.
Welcome back, guys. We have launched our brand new podcast as of a week ago, and we are so excited with the outpouring of support we have received. You guys have been incredible to share the podcast, to give us feedback, and we are constantly going to be asking you for that. We want to know your thoughts on it. We want to know who you would suggest that we interview. We want to know topics that interest you, that you would want to hear about. And we're excited to record why we did this in the first place today. So that's been one of the
biggest questions that we've been asked is why, how did you start? Why did you start? And that's what we hope to tackle today.
Yeah. So let's get started. We had the idea of the podcast together at a breakfast meeting. However, there are stories that come before that. So we're going to tell you a couple of stories here that we believe led us to that breakfast.
Right.
So Angie, why don't you tell yours first?
Let me take you back to 2019, and I was just wrapping up my presidential year, president of GSBOR, and I was sitting, there's a cliche that if you want something done, give it to a busy person, right?
Sure.
And I tend to be more productive when I am super busy and involved in that kind of thing. And as you can imagine, being president of a large trade association, I was very, very busy that year. As my year was coming to a close, however, I was thinking, okay, what's next? Mm-hmm. I know that I have the time to do things because I made time to have this sort of second job, which was my presidency. And now what am I going to do with that time? Mm-hmm. So podcasts had always been of interest to me. I listen to podcasts. I enjoy listening to those. And I thought, I think I might want to do one of those. So I looked back in preparation for this episode today, and in late December 2019, I sent out an email to a few of my very creative friends, and it was titled, Angie Starts a Podcast.
Okay.
And I asked for feedback I kind of told them what the premise of what my ideas were, and I said, you guys are very creative, help me think of a name, whatever you can help me come up with, that would be awesome. I invite your input. And I sent that out, and I immediately got a response back from a very creative friend of mine, Sandy Zwingle. And from there, I started to develop a logo, and I had a name. I had taken some steps. I'd even had my assistant at the time look into what it took to produce a podcast, that kind of thing. And so that takes us up to February-ish of 2020. And I'm really digging into this and trying to figure out how I'm going to make this thing happen. Mm-hmm. And then we all know what happened then, right?
We do.
It was COVID, which had to take me down a totally different path. I had to put aside some things that I had really looked forward to having the time to do and really focus on inward, right? Whatever that looked like in 2020, just focusing on some different things.
Sure.
So I had to put that on the back burner for that time frame, and then we'll catch up with that story later after we hear what your 2019 story is, because you also have one about podcasting.
I do. And really, mine starts with me being obsessed with podcasts. So I'm going to say that I started listening to podcasts maybe in 2017 or 2018. In the last few years, and I think probably COVID took me to a bigger podcast listening. I remember Glennon Doyle launched her book, her new book. I believe that one was Untamed, during COVID. And then she launched her podcast after that. So I'm just reminded of reading her book and then following her podcast after that. But my joy, my learning capacity, I started to really see a difference in my daily life, really, by starting getting ready in the morning by listening to a podcast. Mm-hmm. So in 2018, 2019, I remember having a lunch, breakfast, something with one of my good friends, Callie Linville. And Callie is a special person of sorts because she's so introspective. Mm-hmm. She's one of those people that if you don't know her and have communication regularly outside of social media, you would know how deep of a person she is by following her on Facebook. Mm-hmm. So I had met with her and I had thought, wouldn't it be nice for me to get together several of my friends that really make an impression on my life daily, weekly, monthly? Wouldn't it be nice if I got them together at the same table? So I organized a dinner, and looking back, I can't remember if I actually had the dinner in 2018 or 2019. And I had about 6 girlfriends there, maybe 7. And I invited them to my house. We had dinner together. I made them dinner, and we just had fellowship around the table. Mm-hmm. And I knew when I had the idea to bring them together. So you're bringing different friendships together. Sometimes you wonder how that's going to go.
Social circles,
right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I knew after it was over with that I had something burning inside of me to bring people together to talk about women issues, to talk about love, to talk about struggles and hurts and just all the things that we go through as people, as humans. Mm-hmm. So then at the end of that year, I thought, okay, I'm going to take it a step forward and I'm going to create this Facebook group. And I want to say possibly I did that early 2020. Mm-hmm. And I created a Facebook group and we all get invites to Facebook groups and decline politely and think, what is this moron doing? But I'm sure I had some receptions like that. But anyway, I sent this invite out, and I hadn't fully formulated my plan of what I was going to do. But I knew the first thing that I had to do was get all of these women together, and I'm pretty sure you were on the list, Angie, all of these women together in my house, and have a couple of topics and have a few things that I know we all can share together. So if Angie knows about this, she could tell everybody or every one of my friends about that topic, and so-and-so could talk about this and what have you. So that's what my vision was. And then COVID happened. Mm-hmm. So I believe that I had sent that out and I'd gotten a few accepted, and I had just given a broad, I'm going to schedule a dinner and I hope that you will come. And then COVID happened, and kind of like you, a lot of things just kind of died right where they had started. Right. Because we had months that we were at home and we really you and I had to go back to our real estate business and focus on how do we keep the business afloat, and how do we get our agents in the office when we all can't come to the office. So we had to create Zoom meetings and,
different priorities.
It is. Yeah. So that's kind of my 2019 story. Has nothing to do with yours. Right. But we'll get there.
Yeah. We were on similar paths at some point, in 2019, early 2020. Right. We were both looking and searching for something additional to what our everyday was like. Yeah. And so at some point, those paths collided. Right. So in December of let me take you back. Tell me about this. Let's go back. Let's take our listeners back to May of 2022 then. Right. So we'll fast forward from 2019, 2020 to 2022, and you're president of GSBOR.
Right. So the year of my presidency, excuse me, and you and I go to D.C. Mm-hmm. You are a regular attendee. I get to attend because I'm the president that year. and you and I ended up on a patio together, and we had the afternoon to kind of kill before we went to something that night. So we are sitting on this patio. There's music in the background, live music. We're having a cocktail. We ended up having some food, and so it's a relaxed setting. And you and I, up to this point, we've had fun together, but it's generally been in a real estate board setting, many times a board setting. So our friendship really hadn't taken our conversations outside of, not too much, other than an ordinary conversation, but we really hadn't gotten into what does the future look like for you, Angie, and where do you see yourself in 5 years? So we sat on this patio and we kind of just told how we saw our futures unfolding.
Right.
And you and I had never went there before.
Right.
And as great of a conversation as it was, it ended fairly quickly within an hour or two, and then we were back to business.
Right.
So,
and how
do you remember that?
So I want to point out a couple of things why this was unique. So when we go to these conferences, especially the one in DC, it is mainly about advocacy. And as the RPAC chair for the Greater Springfield Board of Realtors, I have a lot of meetings to go to. I have the board meetings, and I have, advocacy meetings. So, and unbeknownst to you, this was a rare occasion when I would have an afternoon that I could just sit and enjoy a conversation. And you're right, it went beyond most of our discussions up to that point, and our we had a friendship, but a lot of our conversations centered around board issues and things like that. So it was unique at that in that particular setting when I'm so used to at those meetings running from here to there and everywhere. And I might have an hour or two, but to have a full afternoon that it was pretty wide open was unique.
Okay.
So,
and I didn't know that.
Right.
I'm just learning that.
Yes, you're just learning that. So I thought about that again as we were preparing for this, that it was a unique situation. And then when I left that, again, us not ever having talked about future plans or what we wanted to do, I walked away thinking, it was the first inkling I had that you and I do things very similar. We have similar, we're both very goal driven. We have things we want to accomplish. We're gonna stay on task until that's happened.
Yes.
And I really felt like for the first time that we really had a lot in common.
Yeah,
a lot in
agree.
common in terms of how we run our businesses and what we want to do. So those were two things, and I walked away thinking that was a very interesting conversation, and I had this inkling in me that somewhere down the road something would follow up with that. Serendipity, the universe, God, whatever you want, however you want to put that, but something was going to happen along our paths that would bring us back maybe to that same conversation.
Agree. And I would say that just being able to reflect on that, and sometimes you leave conversations and you can't stop thinking about them. And I think for me, it left me with this, again, another little desire that I kept going back to and thinking about just the topics and the conversations and what came out of it. So I just continued to kind of resonate on what we had talked about.
And Tonya, I think part of that is we had a real conversation.
Yeah.
I think as businesswomen, we're going about our day to day, and we have these surface conversations with the people around us, right? About
So
our
often.
hair and our weight and our, what we're going to do, what we're going to cook for dinner that night, that kind of thing.
Right.
But we had a real conversation that involved kind of digging a little bit deep and thinking about, if you ask me a question like, where do you want to be in 5 years? I'm not going to give you some kind of fluff answer. Because you asked me a question, I want to really, and it makes me think. So we want to be around people that are going to challenge us, that make us think, that we can have deep conversations with. And that's what you were going for with your group of women that you were trying to bring together. And it's something that I desire all the time. I want to surround myself with those kinds of people.
For sure. And I think you're good at that, Angie.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. So let's bring in Lori Robertson.
Yeah.
So I met Lori maybe mid 2022, and the introduction came through Barth Fricker, a friend of ours that works at the board. And he just told me he wanted me to meet Lori. I have somebody I want you to meet. Can you go to lunch on this day? Yeah. I didn't know Lori from Adam. And so we meet, and they have a background together. So they talked a lot about that. And I left that meeting, and your name was mentioned. So I knew you knew her, but I didn't know how you knew her. And I'll let you tell that. But she followed up with me quickly after that meeting, and just on a friendly basis, and said, hey, let's get back together. I really enjoyed meeting you. And so she and I met a few times later in the year, and she's a speaker coach, and she has a lot to offer her friendships, in my opinion, because she has great questions. She's just one of those people. Like my friend Callie, I think Lori is one of those people that you just learn so much when you're with her.
Right.
You can't absorb it all sometimes.
Right. She's very genuine. She has a true sense of curiosity, and she is a deep thinker.
Yeah.
She wants to have those deep conversations. And I met her as I was exploring becoming a speaker. And again, she owns a business, speaker coach, and we got to work together a little bit and try to develop my ability to speak in public and that kind of thing. So yeah, we both have that experience with Lori.
Okay. So fast forward to the end of 2022, you and I were in NAR, another National Association of Realtors conference, in November.
Right.
And the conversation came up there that we should have, dinner or breakfast or something with Lori together. Let's get together. And I want to say that I text her there. I put us in a group chat, and I text her there. And you and I were busy that week, and she was busy as well. So we said, yes, let's do it. And then it never got planned.
Right.
So roll into, maybe the end of December, and I believe you text me and said, hey, we never followed up on this. Are we getting together? And you restarted the conversation, and we made the plan to go to breakfast. So we had breakfast, I'm going to say, somewhere in January of 23 of this year.
Right.
And you think, what did you think? I'll let you tell it. You tell me.
That I'd kind of forgotten that you had texted Lori and we talked about it at that meeting. And then when I finally got the email, or, in late December, for some reason I was thinking, okay, what's up? I guess I'd forgotten about that or whatever, because in my mind, I'm thinking, what's Tonya want to talk about? Why are we getting together? Does she have an agenda? What she want to accomplish? There's all these things going through my head. And of course I'm going to say yes, because we're friends, and anytime we can get together and involve Lori, that's going to be a good time. So of course I said yes, and then really didn't think about it again until the week that we did meet, which was in January.
Right. So we get together for breakfast. We meet in Nixa. And I was running behind.
Yes.
And what did you say to Lori?
So Lori and I are there first. And I said, do you know why Tonya wanted to get us together? And she said, no, do you? And I said, no. And so we're back and forth trying to figure out why it was we were there. And not that we had to have a specific reason, but we're all three very busy people. So we're thinking that Tonya has an agenda.
Right. Well, and we all three had never been out together before.
Right.
So I think that's important to point out.
Yeah.
So just a little bit about me. At the end of the year, each year, I become so goal focused because I spend a lot of time reviewing the year in business. So I was reviewing 2022 in business last year in November, and I start setting goals for myself. I know what my numbers were. I know where they came from. I know what I've done. I know what maybe I didn't accomplish that was on my list. And so that was part of this desire. the fire that gets to burning in me at the end of each year to set those goals for the new year. And I wanted to get in front of 2 women leaders that I respect and that I know can offer me something. And so my agenda really was just to find out what was on each of your lists to accomplish in 2023. And I believe that's how I proposed it. And both of you were sitting there and we have kind of pleasantries and we just chit chat just a little bit about the holidays.
Right.
And I said, okay, girls. And you both kind of looked at me like, oh boy, what's she going to tell us? What's she going to, what are we going to have to do? And I said, it's goal setting time. I'm sure both of you have your goals set for 2023. I want to know what they are.
Yeah.
And you were having a rough week.
I was. And let me tell you, when you throw out that question, that's not a 1 or 2 word answer, right? That it was like,
Heavens no.
Boy, let's just get right into it. What's your goals for the year? Let's talk about that. And yes, I had a rough week that week. Things happen sometimes in our lives that we just have to deal with. We know in the end it's going to be better. We know it's the best thing to have happened, but we've got to deal with it while it's right in front of us.
Absolutely.
So you asked that question and it immediately opened the door for me to kind of tell you guys a little bit about what had happened that week and how I was feeling at the time. And it was a great opportunity for me to sort of share in a safe space because, again, you want to surround yourself with those people who don't judge, who appreciate what you're going through and will offer support, advice, suggestion, whatever.
Right.
So I knew I was in that safe space and I could share what was going on that week. And that just kind of opened the floodgates. And we started to go around the table and talk about then some of what our goals were. And we've mentioned that Lori's she's introspective. She's very inquisitive. And the two of us as brokers, there are some lines that brokerages don't cross, right? We kind of stay within our 4 walls.
For sure.
Except for when we go to the board, which we explained in episode 1. And so Lori was throwing out suggestions. She was throwing out thoughts and just throwing stuff against the wall until something stuck. Right?
Yeah. She was trying to get us to maybe elaborate a little more on our future goals. And so we were discussing those things. And she says, after she asked a few questions and you said, well, that's not really how it works in our industry. And then she says, well, have you ever thought about doing something together? And listen for the crickets. Cricket, cricket, cricket. Angie and I turn and look at each other and there were crickets, but we were smiling and we were like, no, but it was in that moment that I think she and I realized that maybe, holy shit, maybe our paths have been together for several years for a reason. And maybe we sat on that patio in May in 2022 for a reason. And maybe we both somehow know Lori for a reason. So I think there was probably a lot going through our minds that we didn't say out loud right then.
Right.
But we then, after we left that breakfast, we made a plan to get together. And we just kind of started spitballing and being really honest about what do you see happening? What do you see happening? And I think you're the one that said it to begin with.
Yeah.
The word podcast.
The word podcast, because I knew that you were a junkie, podcast junkie.
Total addict.
And I had become, more involved in podcasts. As you mentioned earlier, I think starting my day with a positive, whether it's, mantras or meditation or whatever it happens to be, podcast made its way into that repetition for me.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, when I left that breakfast, even though I'd had a rough week, I just left kind of on cloud 9 thinking, This is something new. This is something exciting. This is something we didn't know when we left that breakfast it was going to be a podcast. We really didn't know what it was going to be. But I just felt energized. Again, it comes from being around the right people. It comes from having conversations. And I often say a conversation costs you nothing, right? So we went and had breakfast that morning and just had a conversation, and it turned into something, that both of us wanted to achieve, had not managed to achieve it on our own. And it just kind of came together.
It did. And I have the word podcasts and my addiction to podcasts. I had been thinking about them a lot. Mm-hmm. And I think that little nudge that I got in 2019 to get people together, that thought just kept gnawing at me, and it kept gnawing, and I prayed about it a lot, and I still do, that this is what the nudge was meaning for us to do. But I feel like all of those things happened to get us to the podcast. And you and I really, once we started, we agreed and we said, okay, what could we do this? Everything fell into place to where it made it a whole lot easier. And I'm going to give the shout out to Gershman Studios right now, because I had no idea Gershman had a studio set up. And Angie did know that. So I'm, in my head, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, where do you even start? Like, I know you need a big microphone, and I know you need to be able to broadcast somewhere, but what?
Yeah.
And Angie's like, oh, well, Gershman has a studio set up. Maybe we could reach out to them. And graciously, Gershman agreed to record for us.
Right. Because, it's fine if you've got an idea and and this is new to our listeners, but we've been working on this literally since January, coming up with ideas. Naming the podcast was like one of the biggest obstacles ever.
Oh, gosh.
So just making sure that it reflected what we really wanted to accomplish was a big hurdle. And then the technicalities of all of it, editing and getting it broadcast, as you said, all those things are not within our skill set.
No.
And I learned a long time ago that do what you do well and hire the rest.
Right.
And so that's what we kind of had to do. We had the ideas.
Right.
We have the contacts to get our interviewees or the people we want to interview to do this. We have all that stuff.
Right.
We just didn't have the technical skills or know how to get that done.
No. And thank you, Kate and Jordan.
Yes.
We love you. So our why. So we've kind of told the story of how we got here and our why, and what we want to give back to the listeners is what you want to talk about every day, what you want to hear about. We want to tell stories, and we have a few people that have already recorded with us in upcoming episodes that will tell their story of opening a new business and how they stepped out on the ledge to do something new and take a chance. And we want to inspire you. We want to laugh with you. We want to cry with you. We want to tell the hard stories that people don't talk about, that you might read it on a Facebook post, but you don't talk about it.
Right.
Those are the things that move us. We want to move you too.
Right. When we sat down to start developing this, there were words that kept coming up, and one of them was authentic, which is what led to the name of the podcast. But we also had lots of other, we want to hear from entrepreneurs that have struggled. We want to talk about the transition when you start to do something new, because this was a transition for us. We had to learn to, put time aside. We're both busy. We're both broker owners of businesses. We have to set aside time, and we wanted to put in the time and the research to make this really good. It's going to be something we're proud of, or we're not going to put it out.
Right.
So, and with lots of years of experience, I feel like when you have that, you have an obligation. Then you have an obligation to give back something to help someone learn something. Even just one of you out there, if you learn something from this or take a little piece of advice from us, then we've accomplished what we wanted to accomplish.
Right. Yep. So we look forward to you continuing to listen. We appreciate you. We appreciate you sharing our episodes on your social media and talking about it. We want you to tell us what you want to hear about, and make sure and reach out to us when you have a topic that you think, well, nobody talks about that. I want to hear what these ladies have to say about it.
Right.
So please reach out, and thank you again for all of your support.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we leave, we want to make sure that there's one takeaway. If you could take away one thing from this, it would be that, again, those little nudges, that little inner voice, learn to listen to that, because it means something. It may not be exactly the right time now, but don't let it go. If it's a dream, don't let go of it. Eventually something will happen. Serendipity will make sure that the things are brought to you that need to happen to make it a success for you. You know, I've been reading the book Green Lights. Actually, I've been listening to it because who doesn't want to listen to Matthew McConaughey?
Yeah.
So I'd much rather listen. So I'm listening to it for the second time, and it's the book Green Lights. It's been out for a while, but there's some really great takeaways in it that talks about listening. And this, for me, was a big old green neon flashing go.
Yes.
So we both said yes to that, and we're so glad that we did. And my hope for you is that you listen to your green lights as well.
Same. So we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Simply Authentic podcast. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram.
Be sure to listen to us on your favorite podcasting app.